Welcome back to the Truth Be Told podcast. I'm Xavier, and today we're going to be going over my 2025 NFL mock draft for all 32 teams in the first round of the draft. With the first pick, the 2025 NFL draft, we have the Tennessee Titans. Now, it's kind of obvious what they're going to do, right? I don't think they should do it, but they're going to take a quarterback. When you're a GM and you're a coach and you're trying to save your jobs after a very disappointing season where you went out and made all these moves and you ended up being one of the worst teams, actually the worst team in the NFL this season, you're going to take a quarterback, even if he's not the best player on the board. I think there are probably 12 guys in this draft who I'd rather take. I'd personally trade down and wait a year, maybe try to get a guy in free agency, even though the options aren't very good. But I think they go with Cam Ward out of Miami. He's clearly the best quarterback in this draft when you look at the film, even though I don't think he was a top 3 quarterback in last year's draft. Okay, Cleveland Browns. I think this is the best player in the draft, and the Cleveland Browns are going to love to pair this guy up with Myles Garrett. It's Abdul Carter, right? Everyone wants him to get a quarterback. There's no one that is going to be great out there. I think their best option at quarterback is to get a guy like Kirk Cousins in free agency who's worked with Kevin Stefanski, had some of his best years under Kevin Stefanski, and get them matched up together again on a cheap vet min contract because the Falcons are probably going to cut him, and pair up probably the best edge rusher combo in the NFL. The only team that really has a shot at that is TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith over there in their own division in Pittsburgh. Okay, the Giants. A lot of Giants fans, a lot of NFL fans think Shedur Sanders is going to be a pick. For Giants fans' sake, I hope it is not. Joe Shane, do not try to save your job by taking a quarterback and hoping. Take the best guy available. Take Travis Hunter. He's a lock of a pick. He works hard. He puts his head down. He's not going to be in the media too much as long as his girlfriend stays out of it. And he's going to be a lock at either receiver or corner, or maybe even both. If he can have the stamina for it, let him do it. Okay, number 4, we got the Patriots, right? They've got their quarterback figured out. They got the hardest part in Drake May. They're getting a great head coach in Mike Vrabel, who the Tennessee Titans should have never let go. Now, what do they need? Some receiving help and some O-line help. Pretty much everything on offense outside of quarterback, the Patriots need it. So the best thing for them to do is probably trade down, collect some picks. But I like McMillan out of Arizona. This guy is a contested catch guy that can also get separation. There aren't many guys like it. So I think getting him with the number 4 pick is right where he belongs. Okay, number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team is not very good. Trevor Lawrence, we still don't really know. It's kind of up in the air if he's a middle-of-the-pack guy. He has the potential to be great, we all know, but he just kind of hasn't figured it out since coming to NFL. But this is a team that needs help on the defensive side of the ball. They were on pace to break so many records for being one of the worst defenses of all time this year. That's a problem. That should not happen. Fired their head coach, looking for a new guy. So I think you go with, we need somebody on defense. What position do we value more? Interior D-line and a guy like Mason Graham who's a stud, or Will Johnson who's also a stud at cornerback, right? We've seen what they're worth. Corners can go for 2 first-round picks sometimes. So let's get a guy like Will Johnson in here, solidify, take away that number 1 wide receiver in a weak division, take away a guy like Nico Collins, and give yourself a chance to compete. Here we've got the Raiders, right? What do? I personally think they're probably going to go with Shedur Sanders. I don't think that is the best move for them. I don't think he's a day 1 starter in the NFL. He might be forced to be, but when I watch the tape, he's a really accurate guy who lacks the arm strength, and he holds on the ball too long, right? These are things that can be coached, but it needs time. Don't throw him out there with a bad group of skill position players and force him to suck in a way, right? But I think that's what they're going to do. So, I mean, you even see PFF here has him at the 43rd ranked prospect coming in this draft. That's not a guy who should be taken in the top 6, but that's what the Raiders kind of do. Does Tom Brady change that? Who knows? He's been working with Shedur for a while. He knows him as good as anyone. Okay, here we got the Jets. Do they keep Aaron Rodgers? The big question. A lot of people say no. I don't know if you do or not. I watched the tape. Aaron played pretty good to end the season there. I think if they would have maybe kept Robert Saleh and had a good defense to end the season, they could have been pretty good. Now, Aaron's going to have to take the coaching this year if they keep him. But I think this is a team that doesn't need to take a quarterback because there are none outside of the top two in this draft. Maybe you come back and get a guy like Jackson Dart in the 3rd round. I think that's a sneaky good pick. But he's not a day one starter either. So what I think they'll ultimately end up doing is taking a guy like Malachi Starks, getting that back end good. You don't really need interior D-line help there with Mason Graham just because you have a guy like Quinnen Williams there. So I think Malachi Starks is a safety. It's hard to justify a safety in the top 7 picks, but Starks is that guy back there. So I think for them, you take best player available or best position of need available. Panthers, man, this roster is just not very good, right? You got a guy like Derek Brown still. You let guys walk. Your weapons aren't very good on offense. So what do you really do? I think you go best player available here, and I like Mason Graham out of Michigan for that. Sure up that D-line. They got the ball ran all over them this season. Do not let that happen, right? I think they're going in the draft with that mentality. We are not going to get the ball ran down our throat, and that's why I think Mason Graham is a great pick for them. Here we got the Saints with pick number 9. They have no one on offense. Once Taysom Hill got hurt, and Alvin Kamara, you really saw this roster is awful on the offensive side of the ball. Mickey Loomis needs to do a much better job. And I know it's hard because of the salary cap, but he's got to do a much better job. Who is the best offensive person maybe in this entire draft? Ashton Jeanty, right? But you're not going to value running back this high, especially not when you have a guy like Kamara in your backfield. So you're probably looking at a receiver. You've got Luther Bird in the 3rd. I think that's a solid pick, and I actually like it for them, right? I know it's maybe a little unexpected. A lot of people think he's going to go later, but I like Luther Burden for them. They need a guy out there, even if it's a reach. I personally think they should maybe trade back, stockpile some picks, and build a little bit, but I'm doing no trades here, so I got them taking Luther Burden. Pick number 10. This is a team that needs help, right? DeAndre Swift was not the running back they thought he was, and this O-line was awful. So you've got pretty much 2 options here, right? Really, yeah, 2. You can't take Tyler Warren out of Penn State because you've got Cole Kmet, who's a pretty good tight end, but you didn't really use him that much last year. And you've got Will Campbell, who can play tackle and guard. I see him as a guard in the NFL, but hey, he may surprise us all and stick to tackle. Or you got that guy like Jeanty. I like them taking Jeanty simply because of who they just hired at head coach. Ben Johnson is a guy that we saw. He can create some interesting run concepts, and he could have a guy like Jeanty go crazy with the Chicago Bears. But it's also a team with the Lions who had a really good O-line that allowed that. So do you go with a guy like Will Campbell or Ashton Jeanty? If you're a Cowboys fan, you're praying they take Campbell, but I see them going with Jeanty here. Here you got the 49ers. I think Will Campbell's the absolute best pick in the world for them. They need a guy to come in when Trent Williams retires in the next year or so. So I think that's a home run lock pick at this point. Then you got a team like the Cowboys. They need offensive weapons. Outside of CeeDee Lamb and maybe Brandon Cooks, they just don't have very much. They also need defense. Their defense got walked up and down a little bit. I would love to pair a guy like James Pierce Jr., maybe even Mike Green. Mike Green is a guy that a lot of NFL teams are going to fall in love with. Smaller school, Marshall, but this guy pops on the tape when you watch it. So I really like the Cowboys going defense here, maybe trying to load up on offense through free agency, even though they have an expensive offense already. Don't be surprised if they go for a guy like Tyler Warren, who's probably the best offensive player available in the draft at this point, because this is a weak draft on the offensive side of the ball. So James Pierce Jr., there it is. Now we got the Dolphins. They need O-line. Javon Hollins moving away. I could really see a guy like Malachi Starks, if he falls in the draft, going here. But I have him taken by now, right? Maybe a little bit of a reach, but I just think it works out the best that way. But I think what the Dolphins really need is a guy in the interior of that defense to help take away the run game, right? Only problem, there's not too much of that available. The D tackles in this draft are kind of light, and they're guys that you should take in the 25 to 35 range. They're not guys you should reach. So if I'm the Dolphins, I trade back. You still don't know what's going on with Tyreek Hill or anything like that. But once again, no trades. I'm going to stick to my guns. Go Josh Simmons here. Help protect Tua. He's a guy who needs to play on time and needs time to do that. Continue to build up that O-line. Colts. Man, if this guy's available and the Broncos don't jump in front of him or the Chargers don't jump in front of him, Tyler Warren is a home run pick for the Colts. If you really believe in Anthony Richardson, jury's still out on that, you need to get him a safety valve, and that's what Tyler Warren is. This guy is an elite tight end. Okay, here we got the Falcons. Who really knows what's going on in Atlanta? Jury's not out on Michael Penix yet. I think he has some accuracy issues, which is weird because he was extremely accurate in college. But those are things I think he'll figure out in his second season in the NFL. I don't think they need a wide receiver as bad as it may seem. I think they really need a pass rush. This team got no sacks to end the season. They were getting 0 pressure, 0 sacks, nothing. They had no one. Matthew Judon is not the same player he used to be. Mike Green, if you can get him at 15, is a home run pick. You are laughing your way to the bank if you're the Falcons with this guy. I mean, look at how he played against Coastal Carolina there. I mean, PFF rated him at 92 overall, which is extremely high for PFF grades. Here, right, we go back to the Cardinals. What do they need? O-line help. Kyler was running like he had no business. He was struggling to play on time and in rhythm. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a lot of touchdowns that he could have had if the pass protection was a lot better. So I like Kelvin Banks Jr. here. Maybe take a receiver, but I just think O-line is needed way more there. Here you got the Bengals. They would love Luther Burden if he fell this far down. I don't know if he will. And the reason I say that is because T. Higgins, right? What do you do with him? You want to bring him back because that guy, when he's on the field, your team is 20 times better. But you can't, in the NFL, in a salary cap league, pay 2 receivers and a quarterback that much money. So what you ultimately do is you let him walk, and you see a guy like Emeka Egbuka, and that is a home run to you. Now, if you're the Steelers, your feelings are hurt really bad right now. But I think they've got to do it. They've either got to do that or they've got to ensure that D-line. And if they bring T. Higgins back, look for a guy like Mykel Williams, maybe even Benjamin Morrison, because that back part of that defense was awful this season. You're probably going to let a lot of those guys walk. Actually, that's what I'm going to do with them. Now that I've thought about it some more, I'm going to Benjamin Morrison. They need help on defense. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase will figure it out with or without T. Higgins. They need defense. Now you got the Seahawks, right? Defensive head coach. Need O-line help very, very bad, but the O-line has been diminished at this point in the draft. So what do? You probably hope there's a guy or two in free agency, maybe make a trade or two, and you take a guy like Mykel Williams, shore up that defense. We know how Seattle likes to play football, even with Pete Carroll. Defense, run the ball, make the play in the big moment. So I think that's what they're going to do. Here, if you're the Buccaneers, man, watching that game against the Commanders was hard on the eyes. Your offense is going to figure it out if they bring Chris Godwin back. If they don't, they're going to continue to have a few growing pains, but they're still going to be perfectly fine, right? With a guy like Jalen McMillan and Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans. I mean, they're going to be fine. So what I think they end up doing, they're a pretty good run defense team, and the only reason for that is they stack so many bodies in the box. They got Vita Vea too, but I think Shamar Stewart, guy gets good against the pass and the run. Pretty solid pick. That's who I'd go with. Next, you've got the Broncos. They need a receiver. Egbuka being here is saving them right now. But do they like Matthew Golden too? I know a lot of people are projecting Egbuka to get to the Steelers. And I think if you're the Steelers, you're really hoping he falls to you. But I just don't think he's going to. I think the Broncos are going to be so excited to swipe him up. But don't be surprised if they go after a guy like Colston Loveland, who is a great tight end. They have not had any tight end help since they traded Noah Fant away. Okay. Next, we got the Steelers. Need a receiver more than anything. The question is, do you take a guy like Kenneth Grant to try to fill in? Cam Hayward's getting close to the end of his career. They really need a 5 technique on that D-line. But what I ultimately see them doing is second receiver. We've heard the George Pickens rumors, all that stuff. Take a receiver to put on the other side of him if he's still there. And then the Chargers. You've got a guy like Khalil Mack who's probably walking away this season. Do you take a guy like Jack Sawyer who looks like a Charger to fill in? Or do you take an interior D lineman who's probably best player on the board still? That's what I like more, a guy like Kenneth Grant. So that's what I'm going to go with for them. You got a guy is not there for the Packers. They need a guy at the receiver. They have a lot of B pluses, maybe A minuses. They need an A plus at receiver. They are missing Devontae Adams, but unfortunately for them, there's no guy left. You're hoping Chris Godwin's in free agency and you make a splash that your team isn't used to doing, but that's what you need. So what I see them probably doing is taking a guy like Jack Sawyer or Nick Skirton out of A&M. I like Jack Sawyer. He's made a lot of plays in big moments. That's what you look for in the NFL, so that's who I'd take. Now, if I'm the Vikings, you got to get a corner. Your corners are leaving in free agency this year. I don't see them spending the money to bring them back, even though they can because they're probably going to let Sam Darnold walk or either tag and trade him. But what I ultimately see them doing is taking a guy like Jahdae Barron or Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. Simply because Kenneth Grant is no longer on the board. If he was on the board, I think that's a home run pick for them. You probably don't go running back here because running backs, this is a deep running back draft. You can probably get that in round 3 or 4. I think Aaron Jones is solid still too. Maybe you bring him back for another season. But I really like, man, you know I got the Ole Miss gear on, but I really like Jahdae Barron there. Then you got a team like the Texans. Are they bringing Stephon Diggs back? Tank Dell's probably out for the whole season, so they need a receiver. But like we've said, the receivers are gone at this point. So you just shore up that O-line. That was the worst part of their team. You go with Armand out of Missouri there. You've got to. I mean, C.J. Stroud was running for his life this season. So then you go with the Rams. They need a tight end. Tyler Higbee is getting the job done. But this offense could be a top 3 offense in the NFL if Matthew Stafford doesn't retire and they get a guy like Colston Loveland out of Michigan. Next, you got the Baltimore Ravens. What do? Right? They need a receiver because they got Bateman and Zay, but we saw with Zay being out, it's hard for them to pass the ball. Or do you just go best player available on defense, shore up that defense? Kyle Van Noy's had a resurgence to his career, but he's getting older. I think you take Nick Skirton out of Texas A&M. Then you got a team like the Lions, man. You're losing both of your coordinators. Aaron Glenn probably to the Jets. Ben Johnson's already gone to the Bears. A few of your linemen may be going in free agency. It depends if they want to stay in Detroit and take a pay cut or not. But there's just not very many center and guards this year. I mean, there were last year. It was a great year for it, but this one, I mean, this draft just isn't very deep, honestly. They probably need more depth on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, it's rare to have 14 guys on IR, but they could use a guy on that outside. You're probably going to let Carlton Davis walk, and I could see a guy like Trey Amos or Siobhan Ravel. This guy is an athletic freak. The next team that we're going to have is the Washington Commanders. This is a team that is lacking top guys in the receiver department outside of Terry McLaurin, but it's a team that, as we've seen throughout this season, has continued to develop and get better and better despite having younger guys. So I think their options in this draft, they're going to probably want to get a running back, and they're probably going to want to shore up the offensive line, and most importantly, I think cornerback, right? I think in round one, they're looking at cornerback because of how deep the running backs are and because their O-line's actually played pretty decently throughout the stretch. So I think in the first round, players are looking for Josh Connerly Jr. or Trey Amos. I like Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. You see I got the shirt on, but he played extremely well this year for Ole Miss. Okay, next we got the Buffalo Bills. They need a receiver really bad, but this draft is thin at receiver. Everyone's pretty much gone at this point. I will say Alik out of Stanford is a pretty solid receiver to get around that probably 40 to 48 range. Now, if you're Buffalo, you're not going to be in there. So, do you reach at a position of need? That's the question. And I would say no. I like them going with Tyleik Williams, maybe even a Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, who's down here. But it's hard when they need a receiver that bad to not go out and get one. So maybe a guy like Keenan Allen, who the Bears probably aren't going to bring back. Maybe a guy like Chris Godwin. But I like Tyleik Williams here. Shore up that run defense. Shore up that pass rush a little bit by drafting a stud in Tyleik Williams. Here you got the Eagles, right? Howie Roseman's going to make a better pick than me. I'm confident in that. But what do they need? They need a slot receiver, right? They need a third receiver. They tried to do that with Jahan Dotson. It didn't really work. They need more depth at linebacker with Zach Bond probably leaving in free agency. And they maybe need another corner to go with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with Darius Slay getting older. And we saw the lack of depth this season when he went out with them. So for them, I really like Demetrius Knight. Alik is actually a pretty solid slot guy, but it's hard. I'd probably go with him. It just depends what the board looks like for them here. And then the Chiefs, we all know who they're taking when we look at this list. It's Josh Connerly Jr., tackle out of Oregon, a solid pick at number 32 in the draft. But what I think is the most impressive with him, for them at least, is Jawan Taylor has struggled, man. You either get the option of taking Jawan Taylor out of this lineup and getting rid of all those penalties, or you can move him over to left tackle and hopefully give you a better chance there. But thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out another video on the channel and let me know what you guys would like to see next and what you think about this mock draft. Peace out.